This has been a long time coming, and just to give you a little bit of background on how this all happened, I did a column in the local newspaper here. One of my first columns that I did, and it was called "Evolution is True." Well, to say that all hell broke loose would be an understatement. I got lambasted and harangued and harassed and told what a fool I was online for several days thereafter. And it was quite distressing because I didn't think that there was that level of ignorance about it. And that's what it is. It's not stupidity, it's just ignorance. So, well, it could be stupidity too, but in any case, I thought, you know, I don't have a PhD or a DHD or any kind of a D, so I can't really argue with these guys on the level that they need to be argued with. So just on a whim, I went on my email and I thought, I wonder if P.Z. Myers would even see an email if I sent it to him. And I sent it to him and he saw it. It's kind of like the line in Fargo. I sent it to him and he saw it. And he emailed back and said he'd love to come. And so we're really, really, really pleased to have him here. And it's my pleasure to introduce Professor P.Z. Myers.
Okay, is this microphone working? Sounds like it. Good. Okay. Yeah, it's cool to be here. Although I got to tell you, Bill roped me into 2 talks when I'm here. He's really, you know, that huge honorarium he's paying me. He's getting his money's worth. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is I want to get specific today. I'm going to talk about intelligent design and why intelligent design is bogus. And in some ways, it's pretty awful to have to do this. The intelligent design arguments were first advanced centuries ago. They haven't progressed since. They haven't changed. And as I'll be showing you, they were refuted a couple hundred years ago too. And it didn't take a scientist to do it either. It took a poet. That's all it takes to see through this nonsense that they're peddling to us. So first, let me talk a little bit about what intelligent design is and where it comes from. And the classic example, the stuff where we hear so much about intelligent design, comes from this guy, William Paley, who in 1803 published this lovely book called Natural Theology. I've got a copy of it. It's actually not bad to read. It's very well written, and if you don't mind that rather flowery style that they wrote in the early 19th century. And it's actually got some interesting arguments in it, and these are arguments that actually persuaded Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin thought highly of this book before he went off on his voyage of the Beagle and discovered that it was all wrong. But you know, he thought this was pretty good. Anyway, the gist of the argument is here that, and this is the classic again, that this is this hypothetical that William proposes. What if you were walking along and you stumble across a stone and you ask where it came from? Well, you know, that wouldn't be a big deal. You know, a stone. There's no surprise. It's finding it out there. But suppose you stumble across a watch instead. A watch is complicated. It's got all these parts in it. As he says here, you know, it's got several parts are framed and put together for a purpose. So you wouldn't assume that it was just naturally there. You would assume that it was built by the hand of somebody, it was manufactured, and it was lost there, it was placed there. And that's the gist of the intelligent design argument right there. Like I said, it hasn't progressed at all since. All they do is they say, well, this looks designed, and therefore if it looks designed, it was designed, therefore there was a designer, therefore God, la-di-da. We're done, hooray. It hasn't progressed since 1803. I'll give you another example. This is a more contemporary one, and this one's playing dirty on my part. It's Ray Comfort. Okay, Ray Comfort is a clown, and he's not very bright, but you can see the gist of his argument here. He says this. He uses this thing all the time, where he's saying, okay, every building has a builder, therefore, well, no, every building has a builder. Paintings have painters. Therefore, if you see anything, it's got somebody that created it. I think you can see that that's pretty transparently silly. That's not a good argument. But it's the same thing. It's saying we look at it, it looks designed, therefore it is designed, therefore we're done. Now, as I said, this is kind of cheating because Ray Comfort does not have a great reputation, to put it mildly. He's a very silly man. But in recent years, we've got a big organization based in Seattle that has been trying to seriously push this argument, and they don't quite say the same twaddle that Ray Comfort does. They try to make it more formal and more serious and look more science-y than it really is. And this is stuff from the Discovery Institute, which promotes this idea called intelligent design. Now, I'm going to show you what intelligent design is. And to be fair, I'm going to show you what the intelligent design creationists say intelligent design is. So this is their definition. So he says, first of all, it's not a religious idea. It's an evidence-based scientific theory about life's origins, which sounds pretty good. Evolution is also an evidence-based theory about life's origins. And he says it challenges strictly materialistic views of evolution. And then what he goes on and is explain it in more detail, that there's telltale features of living systems in the universe that are explained by an intelligent cause. Now wait, that first paragraph he says evidence-based. Notice in the rest of this, he does not cite any evidence. But he says, okay, we say it was created by an intelligent cause. It doesn't challenge evolution defined as change over time or common ancestry, but it does dispute Darwin's idea that the cause of biological change is wholly blind and undirected. That what they want to argue is that there was some agent, Paley's watchmaker, or Ray Comfort's painter, whatever you want to call him, who somehow intervenes and creates life. So that you can't just assign it simply to these natural processes. Now, their arguments, though, they turn out to be ultimately identical to those that Comfort and Paley have presented to us. There's really no change. What they do is they show things and they say, this looks designed to me, therefore there is a designer. And this is the example they're always trotting out, the bacterial flagellum. The bacterial flagellum is a complicated structure. It's this complicated network of proteins that have all these different functions to rotate the flagellar apparatus. They have a complex history. They're pretty complicated. But, this is the same thing. This is looking at this and saying, well, I'm looking at this and I don't see how it could be just spontaneously created. Therefore, there must have been a designer for it. But, this is not good logic. It's not good reasoning. And it also lacks evidence because you might ask, how do we know about the structure of the flagellum? It turns out it's not creationists. It's not the intelligent design group that has figured out this amazing structure. It's been scientists who accept evolution and use evolutionary tools in their work. But anyway, the point is, this argument is dead. It doesn't work. It was killed a long time ago, and it was killed by a poet. There's this fellow you may have heard of, Percy Shelley. Who's heard of Percy Shelley? Yeah, Ozymandias, romantic poet, free thinker, proponent of free love, my kind of guy, just a really interesting fellow. In 1814, he wrote this short essay called A Refutation of Deism. It's an argument you can find on the web. It's concocted as sort of a dialogue and reply to somebody promoting this idea that there was a designer. And it basically addresses every single issue that all the scientists bring up nowadays when they talk about intelligent design. It's an amazing read. Really, look it up. It's out of copyright. You can get it for free on the web. It's amazing. And what you find is he's saying all these marvelous things that really make a lot of sense. For instance, he says, design must be proved before a designer can be inferred. The matter in controversy is the existence of design in the universe, and it is not permitted to assume the contested premises and thence infer the matter in dispute. Insidiously to employ the words contrivance, design, and adaptation before these circumstances are made apparent in the universe, thence justly inferring a contriver is a popular sophism against which it behooves us to be watchful. He noticed this in 1814. He's saying, watch the words, watch the rhetoric. What they try to do is a conflation. They use these words like contrivance and design and so forth to imply a designer when it doesn't necessarily do so at all. That's the matter we're discussing. Is there a designer? Can you show me evidence for a designer? Okay, well, maybe there's more to this intelligent design that I'm presenting here. And there are whole books that the intelligent design creationists have written that you can read and you can find out more. I won't recommend them because they're incredibly boring and bad. But I'll summarize some of their arguments. Okay, so this is the Discovery Institute's argument, and you can pull it out of the Wedge document, which you can download, and I give you the URL right there. It's this document that was leaked from the Discovery Institute. A couple of gophers working in the institute who were assigned the job of photocopying this document kept a few private copies and released them later. They're real heroes. They did a great job revealing the religious motivation actually behind the Discovery Institute. But I can summarize the entire Discovery Institute's argument, the entire strategy that they've been following for years and years. And first of all, what they do is they say that biology is complex. I'm a biologist. I agree. Biology is really complex. This is the last week of classes at my university, and the students are facing finals. And yeah, they'll tell you, biology is really, really complex. There's no argument here. This is entirely true. Then they make another argument. This is what they assert. They say complexity can only be created by design. That you can't have complexity arise by accident. Which, if you think about it, is not quite right. Yeah, you can. I can think of lots of complex things. I look at my office, and it was not by design that it is in such a mess at the end of the semester. That it doesn't take intelligence to make things complicated. Often it takes intelligence to make them simple. So anyway, this is their primary assertion. And then, of course, what they draw from this is a conclusion that, therefore, biology was created by design. This is the sum total of their argument. They've got nothing more than this. It's a logical syllogism built upon one true statement and one completely false statement. And therefore, you can say the conclusion is false. Okay, well, again, I'm going to say, you know, this is my short summary of their arguments. You can say, I'll go read it straight from the Discovery Institute, and you can. This is the book that's out right now. This is Stephen Meyer is a bigwig in the Discovery Institute, and last year he published this book called Signature in the Cell. It's thick. It's huge. It goes on and on and on and on. And I've read the whole thing twice now, and it was a painful sacrifice I made for you, all right? I struggled through this awful book. It's really a wretched book, but I can, again, summarize it for you so you don't have to read the whole thing yourself. Here's Stephen Meyer. And it's a bizarre book to read, but once you start working your way through his argument, first of all, he tells us that biology is complex, and he gives us lots of examples. Yeah, biology is complex. And then he tells us, okay, complexity can only be created by design, and therefore biology was created by design. We're done. There's no evidence in the book. This is one of the themes I'm going to try and get across to you today, that when you're working out these things, what you need is empirical evidence to support your claims. You can't just sit there as a philosopher. That's what he was trained as a philosopher. There's nothing wrong with philosophy, but you can't sit there as a philosopher and deduce the entire nature of the universe. It takes hard work to do this, and the Discovery Institute does not do it. Now you might be saying, okay, I'm misrepresenting him because I despise intelligent design and everything it stands for. So you might say, can you give me his own words? And I'll give you some quotes from Stephen Meyer right here. So here's the gist of his book, right from Stephen Meyer. So he says, what humans recognize as information certainly originates from thought, from conscious or intelligent human activity. Our experience of the world shows that what we recognize as information invariably reflects the prior activity of conscious and intelligent persons. He's saying that the only way you get information is by the actions of intelligent agents. Says this again here. Okay, experience shows a large amount of specified complexity. We'll come back to that term, specified complexity, in a moment. It invariably originates from an intelligent source, from a mind or personal agent. And then once again, we get another invariably, creative intelligence. Intelligent design played a role in the origin of entities. Notice what he's doing. He's just asserting this. He's just saying this is the way it is. He's saying that the only way you can get complex information is if you've got a mind behind it. And you might be wondering, is that true? That's something he needs to back up. And I can tell you that it's not true. that we know for a fact that this doesn't work. Now, here's the thing. Scientists know a little bit about information. We actually have mathematical definitions of information, quantifiable, usable parameters that we can define the information content of certain things. It's a powerful tool. We use it all the time. And when you read a paper that discusses information in biological systems, one of the things they will do is they'll sit there, and the first thing they'll do is tell you what definition of information they're using. They'll tell you what this means. They'll tell you how we measure it, how we calculate it, how we observe it. So for instance, I'll just give you one example here. This is a paper by Schneider, where what he says right at the beginning is, okay, we're going to use Shannon information theory. There are specific theories describing information, and that he will use the definitions provided there and the mathematical techniques that are well established in the field for analyzing Shannon information of an object. And what he did is he did an experiment. This is a simulated experiment, but it's a real experiment. What he's doing is he's looking at a simple biological property. And that is that when you look at the regulation of genes, what you have is a strand of DNA, and then there are proteins that bind to specific sequences in the DNA. They don't just bind randomly in the DNA. They bind to particular sequences. Okay, so you need some specificity for this to work. Remember that word, specificity. We understand what specificity means, okay? We know what this is. So what he did in this experiment is he generated artificial binding proteins, artificial proteins that would bind to a particular sequence of DNA. The kind of sequence you would find at the start of a gene, for instance, to switch it on. And then what he did is subjected this to random mutation, so random variation, and then he starts selecting for those that best bind to that particular sequence. And what's shown in this graph is if you look at that green line, what he's done is he's measuring the information in bits per site. That is the number of bits in this binding site. And it's very rigorous. It's all known. You can calculate this. You can repeat his experiment if you want, which is another hallmark of good science. You've got to be able to explain it to somebody else so they can do it themselves. And what you find is when you run this experiment and you subject it to selection for better binding, you see the information content going up. That's the y-axis of this graph. That's bits of information. So you see information actually rising in this sequence over time. And then if you stop selecting, that's the red line there, it plummets down back to nothing. So here's a case where scientists use information, they use specificity, they explain how we can do this, and you can read the paper yourself if you have a little bit of a technical background, and you can see how it's done. This doesn't seem to be the modus operandi of the Discovery Institute. When you look through his book, what he uses over and over again, what Meyer uses, is this term specified complexity. And I sort of vaguely know what specified means, and I sort of know what complexity means. I know what information means. In appropriate contexts, there are mathematical definitions for these things. But in this context, I have no idea what the heck he's talking about. So like I said, he keeps throwing this term around in his book, and so I searched through the entire book. This is why I actually read it twice, is to make sure I hadn't missed it somewhere. And I looked for his definition of specified complexity, this thing that he's measuring. And here it is. This is his definition. Specified complexity is a synonym for specified information or information content. That's circular nonsense. That tells me nothing. I don't, say Shannon or something, so say something about measurements and bits, give me some kind of information. But there is nothing. This is it. This is the totality of the definition of specified complexity in his entire book. I looked through the whole thing. There are no better definitions of it, no methods described to measure it. He doesn't even get around to mentioning the units. Remember that previous graph I told you what the units are? The units were bits. This is how you measure information. You measure it in bits. No mention anywhere of this. And again, those of you who know any science, who've done any science at all, know this is sort of fundamental to understanding a process. Is when you're looking at a formula, you need to know the units. It's not there in his book. It's kind of embarrassing, actually, that it isn't there in his book. So I've searched around in other sites. I've looked all over the web for his definitions. There are none. I did find this nice comment from Jeff Shallett, who is a mathematician. He's a mathematician at Waterloo University. He studies he actually studies information, right? This is his field, is information theory. And what he said about it is intelligent design creationists love to call it specified information or specified complexity and imply that it is widely accepted by the scientific community, but this is not the case. There is no paper in the scientific literature that gives a rigorous and coherent definition of creationist information, nor is it used in scientific or mathematical investigations. So you see the game they're playing with you? They are lying to you. They say, we've got this information, we've got this complexity, we've got this specificity. They have no definitions for these terms. They're just kind of waving their hands over something and saying, it's got it. It's magic. Okay, is there more to this? Well, there's another guy who's been writing about this. If you search for complexity or information in creationism, the other name you come up with a lot is William Dembski. And this is William Dembski's explanatory filter. He wrote a whole book about this, a whole book with no math in it. And he's a mathematician, where he says there's this explanatory filter that you can use to apply to anything. So, a little bunny rabbit comes into the room, you can apply his filter to it, and it would tell you whether it's designed or not. And this is the flow chart. Again, flow charts are handy because it makes things look science-y. This is what it's all about, is the illusion of science. And he says, okay, you take your bunny rabbit, you hold it up, and you ask, okay, is it contingent? Don't worry too much about contingency right now. It just says, that just means, does it have a historical precedent? Does it have something that led to this? If you've got that, then you can rule out the other explanations. And then you ask, is it complex? Now, if I held up a bunny rabbit, I would hope you would say it's complex. I'm a biologist. I'm an expert in these things. Yes, it's complex. Bunny rabbits are complex. And he says, no, if it's not complex, then it's obviously due to chance. Okay, that's safe to say with a bunny rabbit, we're not going to throw it away as simply chance. And then we're supposed to look at it and say, is it specified? Okay, we have to know what specified means, and they don't really tell us. And what we're supposed to do is apply this final step of looking at it for specification. And if it was specified, then it was designed. Okay, but let me return to specification a minute. First, let's look at this other thing, this complexity business over there, and then we'll come back to specification. So the question is it complex? And if it is, then we're on the way to design. If it's not, then it's due to chance. But I have to ask this fundamental question right off the bat. Does complexity have anything at all to do with design? Why should we assume that complexity has anything to do with design? Why do we assume that it tells us something about design? Because I can show you things that are not complex, and I dare you to tell me that they're not designed. So look at these things. Are those designed? Yes, okay, I think it's obvious. There are people who got a huge amount of money for designing these things. Don't you wish you'd ever drawn the Nike swoosh and sold it to Nike? Oh man, you'd be set for life. Anyway, so this is first of all saying it has absolutely nothing to do with design. That you can't use complexity as a metric because simple things are also designed and their filter throws those away as chance. Another thing is, in order to make this argument, they have to rely on distortions of the science. That they want to claim that scientists have been sitting around arguing that the origins of life were simple, that cells are simple, that complexity evolved. And again, this is not true. This is something that I really tear my hair out over because I'm at a liberal arts university. We kind of like history and philosophy as well as science. And their arguments in this regard are such utter bullshit. It just makes me want to slap somebody. So here's an example. These are from a couple of books and papers that are out there. The first one is from Tom Bethel. I don't know if you know him, but oh man, he's a moron, basically. And this is what he says. He says, okay, in Darwin's day, the cell was thought to be little more than a simple lump of protoplasm, or in another ludicrous simplification, a cavity filled with homogeneous, transparent fluid. And now the cell is seen to resemble a high-tech factory. Therefore, all those old guys were wrong. All those people who came up with evolution are totally full of it. And we got to look at the intelligent design creationists as if they were the ones who figured out the complexity of the cell. Jonathan Wells is another guy particularly hate. He's a very bad scholar. He's also trained as a developmental biologist, so he ought to know better. So he completely mangles all kinds of developmental biology in his work. He's got a book out called The Politically Incorrect Guide to Darwinism and Intelligent Design, which I suggest that you change the title to this. It is factually incorrect guide. He says the same things. Living cells, which Darwin thought were mere blobs of protoplasm, actually consists of countless molecular machines that have all the hallmarks of design. These are lies, okay? If you go back, it's really easy. You go back to the old texts, you go back to the old papers. If you've got access to a university library, you can do this yourself and start tracing things back and back and back and ask, where did they say that cells are really simple, little blobs? And the answer is never. From the time they first started looking at cells, they recognized their complexity. That here, it's just a couple examples. These are contemporaries of Darwin's. These were published while Darwin was alive, although Darwin did die in 1882, so I missed his last paper. But this is work where they were looking at cells, and they're describing all this cool stuff inside of cells. They were getting really excited about these little threads that you see diagrammed here, which were chromosomes. They knew about these in Darwin's day. They knew about lots of other organelles. They had some pretty amazing work out there. I also study optics in my spare time, and they had amazing optical microscopes at that age. They had mastered the full resolution limits of the microscope in Darwin's day. So they weren't missing anything. They knew about this stuff. And even worse, what about Darwin? Did Darwin have this idea that cells were just little blobs? And no, he published papers on this. These are a couple of papers that Darwin published where he was looking at plants and the activity in the cells, and he's describing all these organelles inside the cell. So what am I telling you? I'm telling the intelligent design creationists have been lying all the way. And they're ignorant and stupid, and they don't know anything about history. Okay, they don't know anything about science either. So let's get back to this complexity thing. Where does it come from? And I just told you that simple things can be designed, so complexity is no measure, and complex things can have simple origins. So here's something pretty complex. This is the Mandelbrot set. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. This is this amazingly detailed figure that you can get from the complex number plane by just carrying out this very simple calculation. You can zoom in on it. It's got infinite complexity as you zoom in deeper and deeper. And you might be asking, what kind of awesome formula generates something so elaborate and so beautiful? And this is the formula. That's it, really. It's an extremely simple formula. Okay, if you can't read it in the back, it says Zn plus 1 equals Zn squared plus C. It's just a formula that you apply iteratively to each point in the complex number plane to generate a number of iterations, and that tells you what color to paint this little picture and so forth. And you get this amazing complexity out of it. This is awesome stuff. And it's simple. Calculating it takes time, takes a computer, but the actual source of this complexity is incredibly simple. Okay, so I'll remind you again of this explanatory filter of Dembski's, and there's that other term, the specification. What is specification? Where does this come from? As near as I can tell, what we mean by specification is that there is a prior description. There is, if you use patent terms, there's prior art before the instantiation of the object. That what's gone on is, if somebody has written up a blueprint, for instance, before the thing was built, and he shows you the blueprint, and it's certified, it actually comes from this particular point in time, before the object was built, you can say pretty certainly, well, okay, I agree with you. This object was specified by this blueprint and was then subsequently built. So I think that's what they mean by specified complexity. You've got to have some prior blueprint that describes the existence of this particular structure. And then you can say, yes, it was designed. But then we're stuck. Look at these things. There's squid, there's bunny rabbits. Where is the specification? What I want them to do is come up to me with a blueprint signed by God, notarized by some other being who lived 5 billion years ago, with some kind of evidence of its authenticity. A blueprint for a bunny rabbit. Before they were bunny rabbits, then I would say, okay, yeah, you've done it. You've shown specified complexity. You win. But they don't do that. They can't do that. It's actually kind of a silly premise. We know where the information for the rabbit comes from, right? It's in the DNA, and the DNA is progressively modified over time. There is no prior blueprint laid down for a bunny rabbit. Now, Meyer actually summarizes his book for me, and these are what I'm about to show you is the bullet point list that he presents at the end of the books. At the end of his book to show that he has done his work for us. And this is it. Okay, he says, despite a thorough search, which I would argue with, no material causes have been discovered that demonstrate the power to produce large amounts of specified information. Again, this is bullshit. We know this is false. We know you can do this. We have all kinds of things where without intelligent guidance, we can generate more information. When we look at natural processes, when we look at genetics, we see how genetic errors can increase the information content of DNA. So this is simply false. Then he says, intelligent causes have demonstrated the power to produce large amounts of specified information, which is true. Yes, you can sit down and you can write a poem, you can put together a blueprint, you can do all kinds of complex things using your mind. So this is something we do not contest, we agree. And then his conclusion, again, we got this silly syllogism where it's built on a false premise and a true one. Intelligent design constitutes the best, most causally adequate explanation for information in the cell, which is simply false. It doesn't work. Now, as I mentioned a few times before, the things we're looking for is empirical evidence. Show me evidence. Wave that blueprint for a bunny rabbit in front of me, and then maybe I'll listen to you. So what kind of evidence does Stephen Meyer show when he goes off and gives talks like this to people friendly to his ideas? Well, here's the most common thing he shows. Mount Rushmore. Okay. And he shows this and he asks the audience, do you believe this was designed? I'll ask that, do you believe this was designed? Yeah, I would agree. Pretty clear. This is a striking resemblance to known historical figures. I can't believe that just happened by accident. Furthermore, you know, if you go to Mount Rushmore, if you go to visit this park, I've been there before in South Dakota. It didn't impress me too much, but okay. It's the entire museum part of it is an exhibit describing how it was built, showing all the workers out there dynamiting the thing and chiseling and all this kind of stuff to build it. So you've got clear evidence of how it was constructed there. That's the real evidence that it was actually designed. But now, this isn't good evidence. This, if we step back, this is evidence for step 2. Intelligent causes have demonstrated the power to produce large amounts of specified information. I believe that. Yes, here's a demonstration. So what? That's the true part. The difficult part is, do we have reason to think that it couldn't have been other causes, that there can't be designed by other causes? And I'm going to quote Percy Shelley again from 1814. Here's what he says about this very same argument. Why do we admit design in any machine of human contrivance? Simply because innumerable instances of machines having been contrived by human art are present to our mind, because we are acquainted with persons who could construct such machines. But if having no previous knowledge of any artificial contrivance, we had accidentally found a watch upon the ground, we should have been justified in concluding that it was a thing of nature. There was a combination of matter with whose cause we were unacquainted, and that any attempt to account for the origin of its existence would be equally presumptuous and unsatisfactory. So Percy has it pegged that the reason we think that this is designed is because we know how things are designed. We know how intelligent people build statuary. And we're matching it to this particular design, and that leads us to the conclusion that, yeah, this was created by human beings. No problem at all. So what the intelligent design creationists, the idiots as we like to call them, are doing is they're using empiricism. They're using an empirical foundation to determine this is design, because they know from past experience what kinds of things humans will build. Similarly, Shelley is making a good argument here. Yeah, if you knew nothing about watches, if you knew nothing about artificial structures at all, you know, if you were Ugg the caveman strolling along and you found a watch, you wouldn't necessarily assume that it was built. In fact, you might assume that this could not possibly be an artifact. It couldn't possibly be created because you've never seen anything like this, and you've spent a lot of time whittling on wood and chipping flints, and you've never turned up a watch. The reason we know a watch is designed because we know that watches are designed. So let me talk about a few examples from science of the kinds of evidence for evolution we look at. And I want to mention this one paper because I don't think people cite it enough. It's a really good paper by Farmer and Habura. And it's one of the few examples of intelligent design creationism mentioned in the scientific literature. There are these big public databases that you can get on, and you can search the entire peer-reviewed scientific literature, and you can search for terms like intelligent design. And the funny thing is, if you search that peer-reviewed scientific literature and for that term, you will find papers, and they're all papers like this one that say how stupid it is. And a lot of scientists are now taking an active approach and pointing out examples that show that intelligent design doesn't work. What this is a paper that's talking about protists. So protists are single-celled creatures. You've probably seen them, in microscopes, things like paramecia and amoeba and so forth, stuff that you can study in fresh water and salt water. And what he's saying is that if you look at this, if you look at protists, they are an excellent example to refute intelligent design. Why? Because we see the evidence of their evolution everywhere. As it points out here, IDE has been embraced by a wide variety of creationists who promote highly questionable claims that purport to show the inadequacy of evolutionary theory. So here what they do is they find an example that shows the adequacy of evolutionary theory, that thoroughly shows that evolution works. So they find examples from persistent biology that are well suited for providing evidence of many key evolutionary concepts. And yeah, the paper goes through piece by piece and illustrates all these wonderful examples. It's full of very good examples. If you're a teacher, I recommend looking it up and reading it. If you can't find it, write to me and I will send it to you. Anyway, the kinds of things he talks about is there's a huge amount of molecular evidence for the evolution of protists, and this is using the example of the foraminifera. And you get these beautiful trees out of them, all worked out by molecular techniques, that these creatures are all related to each other. And that there's a specific pattern of inheritance that you can see, that there's families, that there's groups that you can find them falling into. This is all very well demonstrated by the molecular evidence. Unfortunately, a lot of people do not like the molecular evidence because they don't understand it. And they always say, show me fossils. I'm one of those molecular guys. Fossils kind of bore me. They're all right, but they're kind of cool. But the real answers are all found by looking at the molecular evidence. But in the case of things like protists, like these forams, the fossil record is amazingly good. Why? Because these are the creatures that proliferate in huge numbers, and they get, most fossils don't make it, they don't survive it to the modern day, but when you've got a species that produces trillions of individuals, there's a good chance that some of them will make it and you'll actually find them. So the fossil record is really well documented for these creatures. We've got continuous series showing progressive evolution of these lineages of forams. So this is just a diagram illustrating these. You can see it goes back 600 million years. We've got a great fossil record of 600 million years of the evolution of forams. Now this is a kind of a technical diagram. It illustrates a whole bunch of things like reticulopodia, which I'll mention are just these web-like pseudopods that these forams extrude, and multilocular. It just means that they're made up of many compartments. You go from creatures that have a single compartment, a single shelled compartment called a test that encompasses the protist. And later in evolution, these tests get more and more elaborate. They become like little apartment complexes with lots of little spaces all over the place. And you can see that kind of progressive evolution demonstrated in the fossil record. Now, here's the deal, though. For forams, we have all this detailed information on step-by-step evolutionary change, which means you have a couple of alternatives for your interpretations. Either evolutionary processes are sufficient to explain complex lineages of numerous organisms over hundreds of millions of years, completely undermining the Discovery Institute's argument that evolution is inadequate, or the alternate choice is God is an extremely fussy micromanager who personally greatly cares about reticulopodia and multilocular tests as much as even more than he does human brains and human morality. Because after all, he spent 600 million years refining step by step in exquisite detail all these forams, and he's only spent about 200,000 years on humans. So clearly, we know which one it has to be more important to him. Okay, so the other argument I would make is that when we have tried to apply intelligent design to real science, it doesn't work. That it doesn't help. It actually tends to confuse issues. And I'm going to give you one example from my field, which is developmental biology. And I got to give you a little background here. In developmental biology, for many, many years, this is like work from 1900, there was this raging debate about how you specified complexity. See, I can use those words too. In an embryo. Now what you got is you got this embryo that starts out of a single cell, right? It divides a whole bunch of times into a mass of cells. And some of those cells will then decide to become the head, and some the tail, and some limbs, etc. How do they do that? How do they figure that out as they're developing? And one early explanation was this one, that there were cytoplasmic determinants. Now what happened is the egg was not a featureless blob, again refuting that claim that the creationists made about 19th century scientists. They said the egg is not a featureless blob, that what happens is that the mother paints a little program onto the egg. It's like a little paint by number set, okay? And mom lays down this pattern and says, okay, this part of the egg is going to make the head and this part will make the tail. And this is just a classic example from Conklin. This is work in the sea squirt Siona. And the sea squirt is kind of neat because unlike most eggs, it's not featureless. It actually contains visible pigment bands in it. You can look at this and you can see gray areas and yellow areas and pale areas and translucent areas. And for instance, there is this one yellow band, this one little stripe that's right there on the egg, the one-celled egg. And the embryo divides and divides and divides. And all the cells that inherit that yellow pigment then go on in the tadpole larva, that last picture there, to form muscle. So it's like the yellow stuff says, make a muscle, right? Okay, this is the paint by number kit that mom has provided for the embryo. So it explains how everything happens. This work has been shown to be true. It's been demonstrated multiple times. I was at a developmental biology meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and they had some really cool refinements on this. For instance, they identified that there were 2 cells at the front of that yellow mass that go on to form the embryonic heart, for instance. And so there's 2 specified cells that will go on and make the heart of the embryo. And the cool thing about Siona is you can do all kinds of experiments on those because it's a really primitive, crude, simple, stupid animal. And you can do things like zap the heart cells with a laser beam and kill them, and the animal develops just fine. It's just a little sluggish. Okay, so yeah, these are animals that can get by without much of a heart. So anyway, this is the dominant paradigm for a while, right? Is that there has to be information pre-placed, pre-positioned in the egg in order to allow it to develop into the full embryo. And now I want to talk about the development that showed this was wrong. And it's the work of this guy, Hans Driesch. Hans Driesch is a guy who worked on echinoderm larvae. These are sea urchins and so forth. And I got to tell you something about him first. I'm about to tell you that he's makes this incredibly silly interpretation. I'm going to make him look kind of stupid, all right? And as an apology, I have to tell you a story about him. This is a guy who later in his life, after all this work was done, he's a German. He's working in German universities, and he was ordered by some guy named Hitler to fire all the Jews in his university, and he refused. And for this, he lost his job. So this is a case where this is a guy with a good moral conscience. This is somebody I think we would all admire and like if we got to know him. He's dead now, of course you can't, but you can read his history, and you know, he's actually got some real virtues here. He stood up for what was right against the Nazis. But here's what he did. He's studying sea urchins, and there it illustrates early sea urchin development. And sea urchins, like Siona, they start off as one cell, they go through a bunch of divisions, 4 cell, 8 cell, 16 cell, etc. And they go through a series of pre-programmed, predetermined fate decisions. So that, for instance, the cells at the very bottom, there at the end there, will go on to make the skeleton of this Pluteus larva. That's a strange-looking thing at the end there. And the blue cells are going to make the endoderm. They're going to make gut. And the yellow cells will make the outer surface of the embryo. So he's studying these things, and he's asking the same questions. You know, like, where is it predetermined? What will become what? And he made a hypothesis, a simple hypothesis you might predict from those experiments with Siona. What if you took that 4-cell embryo and you removed one of the cells? What you might expect then is, okay, well, you might lose the left half. You might lose the front quarter. I don't know. We have to look and find out. So he's making a suggestion that, well, we should explore what each of these cells is supposed to become. And the experiment is really simple. Let's take them apart. Let's start taking cells out of here. And so here's his simple, really amazing experiment. Illustrated up there at the top left, there's a 4-cell sea urchin embryo, and it's surrounded by this little membrane, and it turns out that these things are so easy to work with. You just peel away this membrane, or you can also just use an enzymatic digestion, remove this little membrane, and you give the embryo a little shake, and it falls apart. It splits into 4 cells. No problem. And so what Driesch did is he took these 4 cells and separated them, put each one in its own little dish, and what he expected to have happen is that they would grow up, and this one over here make the top left quarter, and this would make the top right quarter, and this would make the bottom left quarter and the bottom right quarter. That's kind of what he predicted would happen. He did the experiment, and to his surprise, that's the result he got, is that each of the 4 went on to form a complete embryo. They made the whole thing. No missing parts at all. They're small, so they're a quarter of the size. That's what you'd expect. But all the pieces are there. And he freaked out. How could this be, he thought. This is amazing. Nowadays we take this for granted. We know this. This is a process called regulation, and a lot of you know examples of this. You may have seen it. You may be one of these. The most common example I can point to is twins, identical twins. Identical twins arise from a single embryo that splits at some point during development, and each half then goes on to develop the complete twin. You don't expect identical twins to be born, well, okay, there's Fred, he's the left half, and there's Tom, there's the right half that comes out, right? They come out complete. So we're kind of used to this. We kind of can sort of see, well, no, it regulates. This is the magic term, is regulation. That what happens is that all these cells recognize that pieces are missing, and they interpolate. They fill in the gaps. They just divide and divide and divide, make another mass, and they go on to form the embryo. Unfortunately, Hans Driesch didn't see it this way. It blew his mind. It really did. He basically left science after doing this experiment, and he became a theologian. Wow, yeah. That when the Nazis come along and ask him to fire the Jews in his department, that he's in a theology and philosophy department. So he's essentially abandoned science for this and moves on, and he starts this discipline called natural theology. And he came up with his own explanation for this. And here's Driesch's explanation. There must be an entelechy, this is his word, or a guiding field or intelligence that directs the development of the organism. He called this a unifying, non-material mind-like something, an ordering principle which does not add either energy or matter, and that the mind may carry out morphogenetic action at a distance. This is the only way he could imagine this result, is that there must be somebody really smart watching out for sea urchin embryos and making sure that all the pieces get there. And he's saying there's got to be some kind of guidance. He thinks there's got to be morphogenetic action just means something must be staring at it and willing its development. And this is his model for all of development now, is that it's a conscious act of a universal will. You can see why he's ending up in a theology department. Okay, this is his argument. Unfortunately, another guy came up with some experiments that tested this. This is the explanation that was worked out in the 1920s with no help at all from Driesch. These are Spemann and Mangold's classic experiments to show the existence of something called the organizer. What he did basically is transplant little pieces of tissue from one embryo to another place in another embryo. And what he discovered is that if he did the right kind of transplantation, these transplants would actually induce the formation of additional embryos. So that's just what's illustrating this result down here, is these little Siamese twin salamanders that he sat there making. And we actually know now what this organizer is. I mean, I've done experiments on this myself in zebrafish, that we now know what molecules are involved in this process. That, for instance, in some of my research, I study a molecule called goosecoid, which is it's an early transcription factor that's expressed early in development, and wherever it's expressed is where it will form the head of the embryo. And by doing really wicked mad scientist style experiments, I can induce goosecoid to appear in other places in the embryo and make cool embryos with multiple heads. I know, classic mad scientist, right? But anyway, the point is that we actually know what the organizer is. It's a small set of molecules that signal cells, other cells, about their location. And what we're seeing is that this isn't entelechy, it's chemistry. That it doesn't require intelligence for this to happen. So instead of disproving a supernatural force, science discovered a natural physical process that does the work. This is what we end up doing every time we do science, is the supernatural forces start to dissipate as we gain more clarity into the actual physical mechanisms that drive the process. And design disappears. And actually, that's why atheism needs science. You'll never disprove any gods. We know how flexible believers are at fudging their rationalizations, but we gradually make the gods so trivial and superfluous that we can cast them aside. And that's what's going on here. Nobody talks about Drisha's entelechy anymore. It's just simply nonsensical. What we look at instead is patterns of gene regulation. We look at transcription factors. We look at signaling molecules. This is where the answer lies. Okay, let me conclude then. I'm going to conclude with more from Percy Shelley, because really, seriously, I read this 1814 pamphlet and I just was blown away because he did it all already, okay? So here's what he says. Thus, from the principles of that reason to which you so rashly appealed as the ultimate arbiter of our dispute, have I shown that the popular arguments in favor of the being of a god are totally destitute of color. I have shown the absurdity of attributing intelligence to the cause of those effects which we perceive in the universe, and the fallacy which lurks in the argument from design. The argument from design, the fallacy. This is, he's saying this, 1814, okay. I have shown that order is no more than a peculiar manner of contemplating the operation of necessary agents, that mind is the effect, not the cause of motion, that power is the attribute, not the origin of being. I have proved that we can have no evidence of the existence of a God from the principles of reason. Now, I haven't gone into quite as much detail as Percy does in his pamphlet. I recommend looking it up. But I concur entirely with him. There is no reason to believe in a God. Natural processes do everything. And there is no argument with that. But of course, you have the opportunity now. Go ahead, argue with me. Ask questions. Or sit there stunned. Yes?
Come on up to the mic and ask a question.
Sorry, I don't have any really fallacious questions or arguments for you. My question is, as somebody who studies this stuff sort of as a part-time hobby, personally, I have to ask, what is the one creationist question that really makes you tear your hair out? Such as, for me, it's the whole, if we evolved from monkeys, why are monkeys still around? That one drives me up the wall, and I was just curious, as somebody who does this stuff for a living, what's the big one for you?
Well, the thing is, well, I agree with you. That's a really stupid question they're always asking, right? The thing is, they're all stupid. There are no smart questions that a creationist has ever asked me, which we'll see. I may have just intimidated all the creationists here, or they may come up and really dazzle us with some stupid questions. We'll see. But yeah, I've never encountered anything that made me feel like, oh man, this guy's really smart. He's really thinking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, good luck then.
Yeah. Oh, I'm good, thanks. I need more questions, though. Yes?
I was just wondering, you work in the United States, and I was wondering if it was your observation that the creationist theory or the creationist movement was getting a foothold in public school systems, holding steady or going by the wayside.
It's a good question, and it's hard to define because I don't think they're getting more of a foothold, but what's happening instead is that the quality of science education is deteriorating. That this is all they have to do in order to succeed, is that they have to make science education suck so bad that everyone comes out of the school ignorant, and then they win. And that's their policy right now, is underfunding the public school system. They constantly distract with things like voucher systems and so forth. They want to, essentially, they just want to shut down public schools and make everyone as stupid as they are. and then they're done. Because science is hard, it really is. And it takes a good education to master it, and we've got to work harder to give it to them. Go ahead.
Hi. I've got 10 questions, but I know we don't have time
Ask
for
me
all
one.
those. I'll ask you one. It's actually a two-part.
Your best one.
Well, this is a point of information question. I don't know how many people have seen, this was in the journal Complexity in December of 2010 by Joseph, forgive me if I mispronounce his name, Joseph Bozorgmar. Are you familiar with this paper?
Oh.
Is gene duplication a viable explanation for the
Yes.
origination of biological information in complexity? He's an evolutionist.
No, he's not.
Is he? He's not an evolutionist?
No, he's not. I've actually got a blog entry on that paper on my blog Formula.
Okay.
If you look it up there, you'll find it there. Bzorgmar is a notorious crank who's been going around writing some very nonsensical papers that are full of sciencey terms, but he really doesn't understand what he's talking about. They're terrible papers. If you want to ask me about them, ask me something specific about them. But you're not going to be able to cite this as just, oh, this is a generic smart scientist. He's not. He's a creationist crank. Sorry. He's one of your people.
I know. I just came across it the other day, so I don't know his background.
It's garbage.
Okay, you mentioned you chided Stephen Meyer for not specifying how do you define specified complexity. Yes. So I would say the other side of the argument is, well, for example, Richard Dawkins says in his the Blind Watchmaker, he says, I think it's page 1, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Okay, so if living things look designed, if the empirical evidence suggests purpose.
No, stop.
Can I finish first?
Okay.
Then how do evolutionists know they weren't designed? And 2, what is the criteria for apparent design? I've never seen anything by any evolutionist that actually defines what apparent design is. Can you define what it is?
Yes.
If it's not real design, what is apparent design?
You're missing Dawkins' point. Is he saying that this is not a scientific evaluation? That what you find is many subjective impressions of things. They say they look designed. They use the English language, which is rich in terms that are used in design, but they're inappropriate in this context.
Well, he's saying things look like they're designed. He says
yes,
biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance
yes.
of having been designed. Of course, he doesn't say they are designed, and neither would you.
That's right. He's
so
saying
what is the criteria? If you're going to chide Meyer...
Oh, wait, no.
So
you're getting backwards, because what he's saying, he's not saying that he has a scientific criterion for saying it looks designed. He's saying that there is a popular conception of things looking designed, that people think a bunny rabbit looks designed. And he's saying, no, we do not use that. So he doesn't have to define it. Instead...
Why not?
Because instead what we do as evolutionary biologists is we look for the explanations, the history that describes the organization of that thing. And what that does is tell us the mechanisms that generate it. And when we look and see that they do not involve design, we can say that the design was only apparent.
So, define it.
Define what?
Apparent design. It's not real design, it just looks like it's designed. I know that if I have a Mazda car, I look inside and see the rotary engine. I know that rotary engine was designed because people in factories make rotary engines. So when I look at a bacterial flagellum, that looks designed. It's the same thing.
But that's what he's saying, is that you are, that's what I've been saying this entire lecture.
Well, if we
is using this rubric that, hey, it looks designed.
Well, we know rotary engines in Mazdas have the rotary engine was designed by human beings.
Yes, and we know that that's designed, right?
So what we can look at a bacterial flagellum and say, well, it wasn't designed?
So we can look at a bacterial flagellum, we can ask, how did it appear? What is the history of that organism? And what we find is a series of natural processes and a bunch of predecessors that show how it arose to its final state. So when we look, we don't see a designer. We don't see a factory. We don't see things.
No, but when we look at a rotary engine in a Mazda, we know that that engine was designed.
But we can go, because we can go to the factory and look.
Right.
We can look up the specifications. And what we're saying is that when you look at a bacterial flagellum, you cannot look up the specifications. There's no written blueprint anywhere. And when you look at the history of the flagellum, what you find is a series of predecessors in other organisms that are still extant that illustrate how it arose. And it arose not by design, but by chance accidents filtered by selection.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Good try. I'm sure the other 9 were just as bad. But anyway, yes.
I've got the toughest question that you're going to be asked tonight. We just finished electing a government that is made up of a huge proportion of, I call them religious nuts.
Yeah. Where did you go wrong? I should ask you, this is the hard question to ask you Canadians.
Anyway,
how did you screw up so bad?
Anyway, I haven't got to my question yet.
Okay.
The last science minister appointed by the prime minister that was elected was someone who wouldn't accept evolution.
Yeah.
And he, of course, is in charge of science grants and so on and so forth. So you can imagine what direction we're going to be going in. What can we do?
Oh man, what can you do? Well, that's one solution. Yeah, you know, you're asking an American this, and we're even farther down that road of corruption than
Yeah,
you
well,
are.
our prime minister has copied a lot of your.
I know
actions.
it's you can blame it on us. All right. What can we do? Well, you know, there's multiple levels of this problem. One is simply that we've got idiots running for office and getting elected, and so you got to stop doing that. You know, stop voting for them. But I think also we need more viable candidates who are pro-science. That often what you find happening, this is what goes on in the United States all the time, is that you get somebody who's a total loser, who's a Republican or something evil like that, and they are not running against a better choice. And so what's happening is that the Democrats are all sitting there saying, oh, I don't care about any of these candidates, I'm staying home. And the Republicans turn out and elect them. So one thing is, as was mentioned, yes, more atheists running. What you need is more good candidates standing up and fighting back at the morons. The other tack to take is a more long-term approach. As I mentioned, that one of the things the creationists are trying to do is destroy public education because they win if they make us all stupid. We need to work better at improving public education, that we need to start at earlier and earlier ages. I don't advocate necessarily going up to first graders and telling them there is no God and thinking, oh, well, this solves everything. It won't. But going up to first graders and teaching them, you know, how much fun science is, how great it is. Here's all this cool stuff. You know, look at this dinosaur. It's 70 million years old, not 6,000. Teaching them critical thinking skills. These will go a long way in the future to fixing the problem. And it's the one ray of hope I offer for all of you from the perspective of somebody in the United States, which it's kind of be scary living next to us, is that I'm seeing more and more young people in this generation doing a much better job of supporting science. And I think things are going to be improving over the next 20 years or so, if you can wait 20 years.
Something else that we need to do is we don't have to tolerate these nuts. We can challenge them.
Yes. Oh yeah. This is another important thing.
We're nice Canadians, so we tolerate anything. Well, maybe
tolerate
it's
is
time
good.
To stop.
We're not going to start throwing bombs. We're not going to start rioting. So yeah, toleration is good. I encourage tolerance everywhere. But I see this all the time when I go to scientific meetings and speak, is that there are a great many scientists who like to think it's not their problem. They're going to sit back and say, well, you know, I've got my lab to run. I'm busy. I've got grants to write. And I tell them that, no, this is a problem in the long run, because they all know this, that grant funding has just plummeted lately. And why? It's because we got Republicans in office who refuse to support science. So what it is also telling scientists and other scholars that they have a responsibility as a public intellectual to get out there and be public about it. And that means confronting this kind of nonsense everywhere. Yeah. If you see if you're in the coffee shop and somebody starts babbling nonsense about Noah's Ark or something, you should walk over to them and tell them that that's really, really stupid. Make them uncomfortable, make them squirm a little bit, make them think. Explain why that's false. That, there's good scientific evidence that the Earth is 4.5 billion years, and there's no evidence at all of a flood, 4,500 years ago. Be confrontational about this stuff. It's really important, because you can see what's happening is that they get away with this crap all the time.
Well, the other thing that concerns me is the corporate control of knowledge, where,
Yes.
where like I think it's really slowing the development of knowledge because of the ownership of this knowledge and no sharing of it and no working together to improve the information.
Oh, yeah, this is what I talk about when I talk to scientists, actually. As another big issue is open access publishing, that if you look at the scientific world right now, we are strangely isolated from the mass culture. That try to look up some of these papers, like that Schneider paper I mentioned. I bet you can't find that. It's on these nice little databases. I can go to my university library and get on the computer and I can get it instantly because my university pays tens of thousands of dollars to corporate interests to make it available to us. But you can't. And that's got to change because this is stuff that the public is paid for. It's stuff that you have a right to see. If nothing else, we ought to be able to have access to it under the American Freedom of Information Act. I know that does you Canadians no good, but us Americans, it's stuff that we ought to have ownership of, and you can't get to it. And there is a movement now among scientists for more open access publishing, and that's going to be slowly changing. I recommend if you look up the Public Library of Science, for instance, it's a great science journal. It's got a huge impact factor. It's really popular. And they get real science that you can go read, and it's open and available to everybody. Everyone on the planet can read this stuff. That's the way it should be.
I recently discovered the Twitterverse, and I'm amazed at the power.
Oh, yeah. That one's it turns out that's a hard sell to some scientists, but no, I'm on Twitter.
And
yeah, PZ Myers.
It's amazing what, how powerful those 140 letters are.
Yeah, if nothing else, they're great pointers to communication, so you can find more detailed stuff with a link. Yeah.
This is a comment more to our audience than our speaker. If anyone is interested in science education in Kamloops, please support the Big Little Science Center because we are out there trying to get the youth and the adults of our community really excited about science because it's really exciting. So if there's anything you think you could do, join us and follow our Twitter feed.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I agree completely. Science is an activity. It's not me standing up here at a lectern lecturing at you. Science is doing stuff, and good museums let you explore and tinker, and that's the best way to teach kids science, is actually let them do science. That's the only way you can teach them science, actually.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that the banana is not designed to fit into a human's hand. Is that what you're implying in your lecture? Because
yes, the banana was actually designed as a substitute dildo.
I have a kind of an accommodationist question for you. I know that's one of your favorite subjects. We were talking in the car driving up here about teachers, particularly high school teachers, who are afraid to bring up evolution in biology class. In fact, teachers who in history class are afraid to bring up anything to do with human history up to about 4000 BC. They're kind of comfortable, and after that they won't push it. Do you think there's any merit to going to educational faculties and saying that when you teach science teachers, you teach them to teach evolution, and if they don't buy it, they don't pass, they don't become teachers?
That would be great if we could do that. Yeah, and we do push that. I'm a member of an organization called the Minnesota Citizens for Science Education, and that's one of the things we do is we try to explain to teachers that they need to know this stuff and they need to teach it because in the state of Minnesota, it's actually required by law for teachers to instruct students in evolution. It's on the books. Great. You can be fired if you don't teach evolution. At least it's on the books and says that. What it turns out is in practice that they can't because all of a sudden a bunch of angry parents will come in and scream at them and worse yet, scream at their administrators and get them fired. So yeah, we do have to encourage teachers to do that, but also more importantly, we have to support them in this. And this is the hard part, is that teachers have got a really tough game to play here because you know, the more I look at public school education, the more I'm convinced this is some kind of institutionalized slavery. If you're a teacher, you cannot have a private life, right? If you are a teacher who is exposed as an atheist, for instance, you can lose your job over this. If you are a teacher who has a sex life, oh, horrors, you can lose your job over this. If you are a teacher who has a political view that is different from, in my country, the Republicans, they will try to fire you for this. And they can do it. And so what it requires is that we have to change this culture, and that requires more of us actually getting out there and supporting teachers and encouraging teachers to be able to speak out about things like this, and also trivial things like, yeah, teachers should be allowed to have a private life as well.
My question is about morality specifically. One of the main arguments I hear for believing in God rather than necessarily proving that God exists is it gives us an absolute morality. I'm curious whether or not you think if you abandon theology, you're stuck with culture, with moral relativity, or whether or not you'd believe something more along the lines of Sam Harris, whereas we can have a biological morality.
I don't entirely agree with Sam Harris. I do approach it in a couple of directions. One is an absolute morality is absolutely awful. Why would we want such a thing, especially if it's an absolute morality dictated by the God of the Old Testament, who's a really wretched character? You know, an absolute morality says that you have a master-slave relationship with the universe, and that's not very moral. But I do agree in general with Harris that where we find morality is in our interactions with other human beings, with the real world. And the fantasy world doesn't count. So yeah, if you want to know how to treat people, what you got to learn is how do you want to be treated. And once you know that, then you know what you should do with somebody else.
Fair enough.
It's that simple, yeah. Yeah, and that doesn't mean it's a relative. They think of a relative morality is okay. Well, then you must be willing to eat babies and rape people and rob banks and no, we do have a morality that respects the rights of other individuals in our society, and so of course we don't do that sort of thing.
Well, first off, I just really thank you that I have the privilege of being here, and I'm definitely from a different persuasion than you are, and I value the freedom that we have to be able to have differing opinions and have the freedom to be able to express those. And my children are in the public school system, have gone through. I have a daughter doing her PhD in math, and just so you know, people who believe in creation are not necessarily all as idiots as you portray us to be.
I know that. No, I know some very brilliant.
The other side of the thought of that, though, is that my children, being creationist, have sat in the classrooms and listened to all the evolutionary teaching, and I think that it's really important that the kind of debate that is going on maintains and stays to be a free debate. Because when we're talking about we need to get rid of this and rid of that, right? I think there's some, I'm hearing some intolerance that is supposed to be something that is very valuable thing here is tolerance, right? So just a little reminder of that side of things. Another thought is I noticed in the, title of what you were speaking on was evolution is true. And so I was just wondering if you have considered that if evolution really is true, that means that all of us are here absolutely by chance. We have no long-term purpose. We didn't come from anywhere that, because evolution, in true evolution, is by chance, right? Then,
No. Well, go on.
then there really would be no reason to even have this argument because there's no ultimate thing to be accountable for, right? So, like, if creation is true and there really is a God, and we're going to give an account to him, and we're going to be judged, and we're going to be rewarded, then it makes all kinds of sense to try and persuade people to believe in God because there is a reward at the end of it, right? But if evolution is true, and we really have evolved from primordial soup, and there's nothing at the end of it, then there's nothing to lose from not believing evolution. There's nothing to gain from believing evolution. So, like, it's just my challenge to you is, like, you wouldn't really have to spend your time traveling and talking about this if evolution is true. So, thank you.
Okay, well, let's start at the top. So I often hear this argument about tolerance, this magic thing called tolerance. And I will agree 100% that we need to tolerate and respect our fellow human beings as human beings. So no, I'm not going to punch you in the nose. See? We're doing great. However, there must absolutely be total intolerance for idiocy. That if you are promoting bad ideas, I'm not going to be kind and generous and say, oh, well, okay, that's your opinion, that's all right. I'm going to call you a fool. Because there are such things as foolish ideas. And denying the totality of science, which is what you do as a creationist, is a foolish idea. And it has to be rejected. And so, no, I'm sorry, I will be nice to you as a person, but I'm not going to be nice to your ideas at all, which are utterly absurd. And I think it's a great shame and a disgrace that you have poisoned your children's minds in such a way that they've grown up to believe in creationism. Now, then you then bring up this canard that, well, then why am I doing this? Why am I promoting these ideas? You're assuming that because I believe that I evolved from apes, and because I'm an atheist and I don't believe in heaven or hell, and after I die I will be gone, that I therefore have no concern for my fellow human being, that I don't care about the future of my children. Then, that's what you are implying. Because I do have a reason to do this. That, I am standing in this room, not a cave, right? I had a good dinner tonight. It was actually cooked over a fire. And, I am going to get on a big airplane and I'm going to fly home. These are things I can do because of science. I have a job where I study living things every day. I have this great opportunity to explore the world of biology. I think that's worth doing. I think that's a wonderful thing. And it's not because God says I have to do it. It's because it is intrinsically beautiful. This is a part of my world. And by studying it, I improve my understanding of the world and thereby eventually improve the world for my fellow human beings. So that's an essential part of it. And then further, there's this other fallacy that somehow the creationist view, the Christian view, is superior in providing us purpose in life. And no, that's not true. In fact, I would say that if the creationist review were true, I'd rather be damned. I mean, what they are basically saying is that you were spontaneously poofed into existence out of mud 6,000 years ago, which is even more demeaning than saying I evolved from a monkey. And then you were saying that my destiny is to spend eternity singing the praises of this cosmic tyrant. This is nothing to look forward to. I think I'd rather be dead and oblivious to it all than live through that sort of thing. So no, your arguments aren't at all persuasive to me.
If I may have a follow-up to that before I have the question. I think I enjoy the creation story, and I'm prepared to tolerate it up until it tries to wheedle its way into the science classroom, and that's when I lose respect for it.
Well, I kind of like to play World of Warcraft now and then, but I don't pretend that it's reality, right?
During your presentation, I think you fairly effectively showed intelligent design to be pretty damn stupid. I don't think that part of your presentation needed to be done, because I've seen Dembski and Steve Meyer doing exactly the same thing on television.
Yes.
And
well, like I said, Shelley said it was wrong in 1814. You know, we keep rehashing this, and
the throwing the dice, the dice thing that Dembski came up with. And also Michael Behe as well. He actually testified in court to the stupidity of the thing.
Yes.
But what you didn't mention there is how very well funded the Discovery Institute is. And I remember seeing a lecture by Eugenie Scott where she had a shot of their premises compared with the hole in the wall that the NCSC has. Now, given that level of funding, how do you ever see an end to this? You've got a job for life, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Oh boy. How do I see it ending? Well, like I said, the ending is only going to come about by improving education. And we kind of hope that people will see that there's a good bit of self-interest in improving your education. You know, look at the economy now. It sucks, right? And how are we going to get out of this hole we've dug ourselves into? It's going to be better technology, better industry, and that's going to be generated by smarter people, better educated people. So that's my hope, is that we're kind of hitting a trough here. People are starting to see the utter bankruptcy of these ideas, and that we'll start clawing our way out, I hope. We'll see.
So do you ever see, down in the States, there seems to be a movement to actually bring church and state together legally, in other words?
Yes, there is, currently.
Yeah. Do you see that getting anywhere?
We are in a race right now. It's happening. It's these changes are going on. You know, even our current Democratic president has been blurring the boundaries of church and state, which has greatly disappointed me. And so we're in a race right now to see if we can get another generation up that's a little smarter, a little better educated than this bunch. We could lose. Yeah, we could turn into a theocracy.
Yeah.
But we have to keep fighting. That's all I can say. And, you know, even if we do become a theocracy, I'll keep on fighting. That, of course, is the case where I would probably lose my job.
Or your head.
Yeah, or move to Canada. There you go.
Thank you for a very informative and entertaining talk. I just wanted to ask you, I am in the habit of writing letters to various newspapers if I do see nonsense about creationism or intelligent design, or my particular area is alternative medicine. And occasionally I do get those published, and sometimes I get a good reception from people, and sometimes I get abuse. Do you see that as wasting time, or do you feel it is effective?
It's very effective. I think it's great. I mean, the way we grow is by making more people aware that we're here. And so what you're doing is expressing a point of view that needs to be expressed, and letting people know that there's a possibility of a community of rational people here in British Columbia. So, you know, that's essential to do. Keep it up.
First off, it's awesome to see you in person. I just wanted to say that.
Awesome. Ooh.
when you are debating with people that you respect despite, let's say, their religion or their creation belief that's founded in religion, no matter what the flavor, like it always kind of to come back on circular reasoning or circular thinking, you know,
Yes.
because the Bible says so, it's true, etc. When you are debating people, you don't just want to say, okay, well, you're a fool, I'm done with this conversation, I'm walking away now. Do you have a nail in the coffin when it comes to that circular reasoning where you're able to kind of point it out and say, look, this is what you're doing? Because it just seems if you say you're circular reasoning.
No, it's a combination of circular reasoning and wishful thinking. And it does no good to point this out to them because they don't want to change. You know, if it's wishful thinking, for instance, they're arriving at a conclusion they greatly desire to arrive at, like that they will go to heaven when they die. And telling them that's fallacious doesn't matter to them because, well, it's what they want, so they stick with it. Their positions are largely irrational, that what they do is begin with false premises, and they may be brilliant in building elaborate rationalizations on top of that, but their premises are false, and there's virtually nothing you can do to shake that up. I have had great success in bringing people around to my ways of thinking, but it does not come about because I tell them this is the answer. This is the drawback to being on the scientific side, is that we don't have a great authority where we can say, oh, well, this is the answer, we're done, you mastered this, and you are now a scientist and you're all through. No, it's a lifelong thing, and it's also a process of hard work. So the only way that people come to our side of the issues is by becoming aware of the subject more, learning more of the details, and on their own recognizing the value of scientific claims. So like I say, I can't take somebody aside and say, okay, be a scientist now. What I can sometimes do is make them really angry with me, and then they charge off to the library and they start reading all this stuff to show me wrong. And eventually they suddenly realize, oh gosh, darn, he was right after all, and I'm going to hell. But that's okay.
Well, it was great talking to you.
Thanks.
The first comment just for my BC friends. I'm Daniel from Society of Edmonton Atheists. So there's a couple of us in Alberta. There's a couple of us here, one there. So we're not all totally crazy in Alberta.
Never thought you were. I wouldn't have been invited here if you were, right?
We're not in Alberta.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
But I spoke in Alberta twice the last 2 years. So
That's
there,
true.
see?
One thing, I'm pretty sure Canada is a theocracy, technically. So you might not want to move here. Because it's like the Queen, and the Queen's the head of the church, and she's the head of Canada. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, you might not want to move here. But my question has to do with theistic evolution. I tend to converse a lot with Catholics who are as much against intelligent design as you are, and they think it's ridiculous. But then they tell you, oh, and you can never really get a straight answer for them, but they always kind of imply that, well, you know, God sort of made the first Adam and Eve, or something along those lines, or he put a soul in somewhere along the line. And my question is kind of, what's your, from a biological perspective, what's wrong with that? Especially what's wrong in terms of, I've done some research, I'm not a biologist, why there couldn't have been an original couple of all of humanity. And I'm not a biologist, so excuse the stupid question, but why couldn't there be, you know, these two parents that were the first parents of all human beings? That's my first question. And my second one is just, in general, what's wrong with theistic evolution?
Okay. We've got a few hours. No. Well, in answer for the first part, why doesn't that work? Well, it doesn't match population genetics. It says that can't be. We didn't arise from a single pair, or we would have much more limited genetic diversity than we have now. So we know for a fact that, this is a peculiar use of the word fact, because the thing is, they don't tell us exactly when Adam and Eve lived, but we know no matter when you go back in human history and human prehistory, there was no period where there was just 2 people. Okay, there was always a large population. I think there may have been a population bottleneck a while back, but there we were talking like 10,000 people. All right, so it's a diverse population that we arose from. So the literal requirement that there be 2 and only 2 parents doesn't work. Disproved scientifically. Doesn't happen. Okay, that's not the way it works. The question about, I'll add another thing too. Another doctrine of the Catholic Church is that the magic moment when they became humans was something called ensoulment. Whatever that is, they never define it. We don't have a way to measure it. We don't have soul meters. We can't plug things into people's heads and say, well, now they've got the soul and now they don't. So it's more unscientific nonsense from the Catholic Church. And then about theistic evolution, the thing I would say about it is the hallmark of a good scientific observation is that it is founded in empirical evidence, that there's an observation, a measurement, a physically derived character that's the start of your thinking. And that your thinking is further refined by the addition of more empirical data. Where is the empirical data for theistic evolution? There is none. Okay, it's wishful thinking entirely that they want there to have been a God because the Bible says so. Therefore, we've got a God somewhere in there. And that's logical nonsense.
I understand that religious institutions don't pay taxes.
Correct.
Isn't that an enormous motivator to keep it going?
Oh, for the churches to keep going, yes. Mm-hmm. They have quite a lobby. Yeah, they're not going to give that up. And this is true all across the country and at all levels of government. I mean, it's a very difficult situation, for instance, in my small town. I live in a town of 5,000 people. And there's a huge erosion of the tax base because in this town of 5,000 people, we have 16 churches. Think about that. This is prime real estate, just poof, lifted off the tax rolls and supported for what reason? I don't know. It's there. And so that's a painful thing to do. You also see it in inner cities when a neighborhood starts to decay and all the businesses are leaving. Who moves in? The churches. They take over. They're like cockroaches. Okay, it's a sign of bad times when you see churches starting to proliferate. And what they're going to do is take advantage. They're going to exploit all the people who are struggling.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a couple of silly things I've come across myself, over the years. The one, like you mentioned already, about, if you don't believe in God, why aren't you out raping people, robbing banks and stuff like this, as if we're no morals at all. The other one is I'm a registered nurse, and generally we try to help people. So you're helping people, you must be a Christian.
Yeah, yeah.
No. A couple of other things you were talking about, a concern about the deterioration of public education. I think it's also a surprise, a huge disappointment that public funds, taxes are used to fund private Christian schools.
In Canada, but not in the U.S. Yeah, yeah, and it's a major issue. In the United States, it's largely historical because we fund our schools with these property tax levies, and there's a lot of local autonomy for the schools, which means they're just all over the map. The rich-poor divide in the public education system is pathetic and awful. Yes?
PZ, there was a recent study where they extracted DNA from Neanderthal teeth and then matched the DNA to essentially non-black people, like everybody that migrated out of Africa and throughout and so forth, and determined...
Svante Pääbo's work, yes.
Yeah, 4%, we, on average, each human has about 4% Neanderthal DNA. Did you follow that one?
Caucasians and Asians, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, it was from femurs, not teeth. Oh, caught you in error already. They've sequenced the full Neanderthal genome, and they've compared it to other genomes, and what they found is a small fraction of shared genes between, well, let me step back a minute. Most of the genes between humans and Neanderthals are shared. We're very nearly identical. We're closer to each other than we are to chimpanzees, for instance, okay? But what they found is that there are certain classes of genes which are found in Neanderthals and then also found in Caucasian and Asian populations, but not in African populations. And yeah, it's like 2 to 4% of most of the people in this room. Yes, boy, you're a pale bunch. Yes, most of you here have a little bit of Neanderthal in you, which tells us that what happened, and you know, this is the model of what happened, is that that human populations were dispersing. Some of them stayed in Africa. So that's the seat of all our genetic diversity, is right there in the richest genetic diversity is found in Africa. And a small subset of that population left Africa up through the Middle East. And as they went, apparently they were raping and abusing Neanderthal women and bringing their children into the fold and so forth. And so they were getting a little tiny admixture of Neanderthal genes. And then, of course, Neanderthals went extinct. We may have had something to do with this. I don't know. Okay, 2 more questions, he says.
Okay, first of all, Professor Myers, thank you for coming here. It's a very impressive talk. Thank you. I just want to make 2 quick points. Firstly, the gentleman just here who's saying that, you know, if you can't be a Christian, you can't be a good person. I always like to turn that back on Christians and say, if you look at the Bible, the one person who stopped to help was the Samaritan, the non-believer. Yeah. He was the guy who did the good work.
Uh-huh.
And then the other point was to this lady over here. I have 2 teenage daughters, and they asked me a year or so ago, what was different between when I was their age and where I am now? What had changed intellectually for me? And I said I felt very strongly by the time I was 16 or 17 that I believed in freedom and democracy and choice and all those good things. And I said, and doing them for the right reason. But I also believed in tolerance. But at that time, I believed in tolerance for everybody. And I said to my daughters, but as I've got older, I've become less tolerant. I'm not tolerant of misogyny, I'm not tolerant of racism, and I'm not tolerant of paedophilia. So where I was once tolerant of everybody, I'm not.
Well, I would say I'm tolerant of people, but it's the ideas. And so yes, if you're going to be promoting pedophilia, you're no friend of mine. If you're promoting creationism, well, you're not quite as bad as a pedophile, but you're close.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot one little story that I think demonstrates why your work is so important and encourage you to continue and why...
I'm not stopping.
Yeah, there we go. Good deal. My son, when he was in grade 6, was told by his teacher that there is now scientific proof that a soul exists. So I think if that's being taught in the public education system, we still need some work to do and keep on.
What was the proof, by the way?
Why, scientifically proved. They just have to say it. It doesn't supposedly have to be shown.
You know, but that I would say that there's a silver lining to that, and that is that what they're doing is implicitly endorsing the authority of science when they say that. Because they never say it's been priestly approved, right, that there's a soul. It's much more persuasive to say a scientist did it, even if you're lying about it. So yeah, you know, we're slowly winning here. That's at least the attitude's there. Okay, very good. Thank you.